It may not look that messy, but do not be fooled because this place is a problem. I know for sure there are food bits in here that we have been keeping for way too long, plus certain items in here that definitely need to be thrown out. While certain drawers are fairly well organized and we know where everything is, other ones are a chaotic mess and need an overhaul. So that is what we are doing today, completely resetting the kitchen space, going through all of the cupboards, getting it organized so that then we know where things are and we only have things that we actually use. We did a process just like this last year where we took everything out of the cupboards, cleaned all of the cupboards out, went through all of our drawers and reassessed the things that we have. But over the course of the year, things build up again. Things that we kept last year, we maybe still haven't even used. So it's time to go through it again. The first thing to do though was give ourselves some working space by putting away the dishes. When we get everything out of the cupboards and the fridge and all of that, we really do need a lot of bench space to house all of those items. So making sure it was clear of any other clutter was a must. I also took the opportunity to do a sweep of the floor because I absolutely cannot stand stepping on crumbs. And we also put the dishwasher on so that in a couple of hours when that's done, we'll be able to look at all of our plates and cutlery and all of that. Any larger appliances that don't typically live on the bench also got put away. And then it was time to get started.
We're going to start in the fridge because the food is easiest, because it's either food we don't eat, or it's food that's expired, or it's food we do eat and isn't expired and obviously we keep it.
It just makes sense. Taking everything out of there, though we did decide to leave some items behind, one of the things that I always need to watch out for with this part is decluttering before I actually have everything out of the fridge. As I'm going through, I'm already getting a good picture of what's going to stay and what's going to go, but I'm trying to batch my tasks here so that I do a more thorough job. So this is the fridge fleet, the things that we've managed to take out. We left the eggs and the vegetables in because they can be dealt with separately. I mean, the eggs aren't going anywhere, but anyway. So effectively, it's just going through each of these, checking expiration dates, considering whether we actually eat them, and then throwing out the ones that don't fit the bill. Rather than having a standalone bucket in this one, we decided just to use the kitchen sink, mainly because these items are chilled, which means that as they spend time outside of the fridge, they're gonna start to develop condensation. Kinda just made a little more sense for them to condensate in the sink, so that then if there's any moisture buildup, it drips off down the drain. As part of this, we're also considering which items are expiring soon, and if there are any meals we can use them in so that they don't get wasted. Any of those I'm just writing on the little whiteboard on the fridge behind us. Not a super big collection of things we're getting rid of, but we've got some that we aren't going to consume, some that have expired, one that we don't actually know why it was in our fridge at all, but hey, not a bad stash. It's honestly kind of nice at this stage if we're not getting rid of a lot, because it means we're not being wasteful in terms of food items. Of course, if there are things in the fridge that are within their expiry date, they're still good and they're still unopened, then there is the potential to like gift donate those, but we don't have any of those in our stash, so all good. Before everything goes back into the fridge though, we just want to give the fridge a kind of wipe down. Obviously we're going to do the vegetables as well, but first the wipe down so all of these don't have to sit on the bench. One in particular that needs some love is the milk tray, because you know, the milk just like gets those little drips around the rim and then it just like sprinkles itself through the fridge. Blah! Just like last year, getting those lower door trays off was incredibly difficult. We haven't found a good system for how we're actually supposed to do it. Maybe next year it'll be easier. But while Vogel took those out to the laundry to give them a proper rinse off, I stayed in the kitchen to wipe down the rest of the shelves and the rest of the fridge. Most of this was just done with hot soapy water, though for anything that was a little bit more icky, I did opt to use some kitchen cleaning spray, but I will say that even though the shelves didn't look particularly dirty when we started, they looked so much better after having a wipe down. As said, we decided to do the vegetable drawers separately, mainly because in pulling everything out onto the bench, we weren't sure how long it was going to be there. I'm not particularly fast when it comes to cleaning, so I'd rather just deal with them separately. Once the rest of the fridge was clean though, it was then time to start thinking about putting things back in. Not everything all at once, but just a couple of key players. We've decided that given the fact that this always gets gross with the milk, we would just much rather clean off a shelf, so the milk is going to get stored up here instead. The Coke always gets stored on this shelf, it's not changing, this is its home, chicken boys. Whereas everything else kind of needs a decision made, except for the vegetables, and obviously the eggs, because they have an egg tray. When it comes to organizing the fridge, there are a couple of things that we like to consider, and annoyingly, some of them kind of conflict with each other. One of the things is that we want like items to be together. So all of the spreads together, all of the cheeses or dairy products together, vegetables notably in the crisper drawers. But I also want to have the things that we use the most as accessible as possible, which typically means putting them on the door of the fridge. This can be a little bit tricky tricky because sometimes the items you use the most aren't really suited to being in the door of the fridge, and sometimes those items you'd want to store with other like items, but then other things in those categories don't get used as frequently. As we're going through and considering where we want to store items, we're also considering how we want to store them. This effectively means thinking about how we group them in terms of baskets or containers, and I made sure to write down any of our ideas as we went through so that we might get some new containers, some ones that are a little bit better suited to storing the size of the items that we've got. For now we're just putting the old containers back into the fridge so that the things are still grouped together, but these ones aren't quite fit for the purpose we have for them, so they probably need replacing. Despite the fact that this has been in my fridge for at least, well, over a year, let's put it that way, and it might have gone bad, I'm just like not ready to let it go. It also doesn't have an expiry date on it that I can find, so I'm like, stuff it must still be good, right? It was expensive. I'm not throwing it away just yet. To finish off the fridge space though, it was time to go through the crisper. This one followed pretty much the same process, so pulling everything out, cleaning out the drawers, sorting out the food in terms of what was staying or going, and then putting it back in. Thankfully, we didn't find anything too terribly offensive in there, like we sometimes do. In particular, when I buy a cucumber for a meal, and because Vogel doesn't eat it, and I don't really get through it fast enough, it ends up not looking very happy by the time I throw it away. Thankfully, none of those science experiments to report today. Not shown here is me full-blown struggling to get the drawers back into the fridge though. They were so much easier to get out than they were to put in, and I was very worried that I was going to break them, but thankfully I did get them back in by myself. The only thing that ended up coming out of the crisper was this sad, very bendable carrot. I don't know if I can bend it with one hand, but on camera it probably doesn't look as bad as it actually is, but I would not eat this, so I think I will give it to the worms and they can eat it. I'm sure the worms will love it. In terms of what the fridge looked like before though, this is what we had, but now as we've done that resort, this is what it's looking like. Everything that's off or isn't going to be used is gone, and while the organization is still in a little bit of flux because we need to get some more containers, it is looking a lot better. Now it's time for the freezer. When it comes to doing the freezer, this is the space that we like to move the fastest. Not only because the food will slowly defrost on the bench, and we want to try and limit that as much as possible, but also dealing with all this frozen stuff makes your fingers cold, and cold fingers are sore fingers, so to mitigate that, we're moving quickly. Just like the last food space, we're going through and asking pretty much the same questions, thinking about expiry dates, is this something we're going to use, do we still enjoy this food, and then figuring out how to put it back into the freezer in the best way possible. While we went through, we also took note of anything we have duplicates of and wrote them on that little whiteboard again, just so that we know that when we use up one bag of beans, we shouldn't go and buy another one because we have 2 more in stock. Often when things get buried underneath each other in the freezer, it's a little hard to get an appreciation for what you actually have, which means you end up over shopping and buying things you've already got, which can in the end lead to food waste. We want to avoid that. Thankfully, we do go through green beans pretty quickly, so it shouldn't be a problem, but we want to safeguard our future selves and not end up filling up an entire drawer just with beans. The freezer doesn't have super strict organization. Roughly, we have meats on the bottom, veggies in the middle drawer, and then other stuff on top. But really, it is just wherever things fit. Now as my fingers are distinctly frozen, it's time to do the pantry, which should be slightly nicer because it's not cold, and thus doesn't need to be done super quickly. Even though we don't need to go fast, I do find that going through quickly helps with the momentum, because this can be quite a tiring process, like getting everything out, having to sort through it, putting it all back, which to some people doesn't sound like a lot of labor, but for somebody who really enjoys sitting down, it is. So doing this process with the intention of keeping the train moving helps keep the train moving. So the cupboard is cleared out, but not cleaned out. These shelves could use some attention. While last year we took the shelves and flipped them all over as part of that cleaning process, they don't really need it this year. They're still bending that way, so it should be okay. While Vogel cleaned all of the shelves, I tackled the task of decluttering our pantry items. While the majority of them were fine, there were certainly some that we were getting rid of because they were expired, and I was also surprised to see how many packets of seaweed we had, because usually we tend in the other direction and we don't have any for the meal that we need to cook. This was another one that got added to the whiteboard. Effectively, in that bottom corner, we just write down the things that are in stock so that we don't buy more because we think we don't have any. Most of the items I could figure out for myself whether we were or weren't going to keep, but there were a couple that I needed to check with Vogel for, mainly because they're items he uses more so than me, and also there were a couple that I just could not find the expiry date on, so I was going to give them to him to have another look over. Along with the items that we have multiple of in stock, we were also paying attention to those things that we want to use up in a more timely manner, because they're either approaching their expiry date, or we just kind of forgot we had them and got excited to use them. Those ones also got added to the whiteboard, usually by the way of a type of meal that uses that thing, or just a reminder to use that thing in a meal. The gin cured salmon in particular is for Vogel's juniper berries, because I'm pretty sure we don't have any other recipe that calls for them. While Vogel was still cleaning though, I decided to go through all of our bulk containers and add anything to the shopping list that we might need a top up for. So things like corn flour, corn flakes, plain flour, etc. Vogel also took this opportunity to top up our oil bottles that were looking a little bit low, and then we got to decluttering the last of the pantry items. This included going through our stock buckets, which sit at the bottom of our cupboard, because that's typically where those duplicate items get caught, because these aren't tubs that we reference on a daily basis. We sometimes have a tendency to forget what is in them. Despite the fact that the fridge took distinctly longer to clear out, the pantry felt like it took longer. That's probably because by this point we were kind of getting a little bit more tired, a little bit more crabby. That is one of the things to watch out for when doing a reset like this, especially when you're resetting your whole house, not just your kitchen. By this point we'd already reset our bedroom, our bathroom, I'd done my office, and while we prefer to do this in an intense, short burst, it can be a little bit more reasonable to do it over a longer stretch of time. We ended up adding some more stuff to the get rid of pile, quote quote, or more like the get rid of sink, so that's a later us problem, but for now we need to put all of this other stuff away. In putting things back into the cupboard, the majority of things went back in the same place. Now, as a recommendation, I would say that if you want to do this for yourself and you have a kind of particular way of putting things into your cupboard, it would pay to take a picture before you start so that you have a reference of where things went when you go to put them back. For the most part, it wasn't too hard to remember where things went because we don't have that many things in our cupboard. I mean, compared to some people we probably do, but it's certainly not a walk-in cupboard. But a reference picture probably would have helped a couple of conversations. Are you doing okay? Because you don't look like you're doing okay. All of the oil containers need to be rinsed off properly and then put back onto their very oily container lid. But yeah, that needs a wash. You can see how gross it is. But once that's rinsed off, once the bottles are rinsed off, then they can go back into the cupboard where they belong. In the meantime though, the cupboard is not looking too bad. In terms of placement, things haven't really changed, but some things did get gotten rid of, so that counts.
Why did we not change any placements in the cupboard?
Because everything was effectively in the best place that I think it could be.
Is that because we crushed it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The final food space though is the tea cupboard, which has, I don't know, tea and stuff. This is the worst angle to film from. Bad filming angles aside, unsurprisingly, this cupboard contains tea and other tea paraphernalia, aka teapots and tea strainers. Nothing super scandalous. The majority of this one we knew we were going to keep. It's really just about consolidating things. So putting all of my hot drink sachets into the same box, making sure that any of the canisters of tea are still ones we want to keep, making sure that nothing was dusty or needed a wipe down, and then putting it back into the cupboard. And then we have the alcohols, of which none are leaving, so looks good. Yay for us. Do we use a lot of them? No, but one of my goals for next year is to use more of them because I like making cocktails and I just never actually end up doing it. So they can stay for now. We will reevaluate next year and see how many of them I didn't use then. What I am going to do though is take the wine from the alcohol shelf and putting it on top of the fridge where the other wines are, or into the fridge for later consumption. After this though, it was time to deal with all of those things that we were getting rid of. Vogel decided to take charge on this so that I could go upstairs and do some video editing, but effectively it's just getting rid of anything that was in any of the containers so that the containers themselves can be recycled. Vogel just did this while watching some telly, and then he summoned me back down.
Hey, guess what?
What?
I got a surprise for you.
What is it?
We're going to Macca's for lunch.
Oh, yay!
Because we've earned it.
Yeah.
But for some of us it'll be breakfast.
Adventure time!
This was a very much needed break for both of us because we'd spent the entire morning decluttering and were certainly getting hangry. So it was nice to have a break, have some chill time together, and then get straight back to work.
What are you doing? Leave him alone.
You said we have to pull everything out.
No, we leave the microwave alone.
The next step is to go through all of the cupboards. We're probably not going to take things out of them because we kind of already know what's in them. We did a really good job of this last year, but just to make sure that things are in places that we like and make sure we don't have any, I don't know, clinger honorers that shouldn't be there. Again, given that Vogel and I try and do this process once a year at roughly the same time each year, it means that when it comes to doing these declutters, we do not have as much to get rid of as we did when we first did it. While that initial declutter can be very satisfying, I personally find decluttering very satisfying at least, these ones are great for just a little bit of a refresh. When you're doing these resets, you don't have to get rid of a whole heap of stuff. It just helps you be a little bit more mindful about the things that you do have, maybe some of the spaces you've been neglecting or items that you might want to use more of in the coming year. For instance, one of the items that we ended up moving was Vogel's fondue set, which we bought for him, I'm pretty sure last Christmas, and we still haven't used. This was something he was really excited about at the time, it's just we haven't gotten around to using it, so it's very much been added to the list of items to use in the new year. We took another quick break for the tradition of making dip as part of the kitchen reset, and then it was on to the lower cupboards. Much like the top ones, we didn't really have to pull a lot of stuff out for this, it was really just going through and thinking about, do we like how things are stored in these areas? Are we just keeping things that we actually use? And for most part, the answer was yes. The stuff we're getting rid of from that section is not very expansive, this glass not included, and neither is that picnic stuff or this tray or this meat probe. It's actually only these things here. So 2 thermoses, I don't know, whatever. Those ones, not gonna stay. And then these 2 sushi plates, because every time we have sushi, this plate is nowhere near big enough. Absolutely not. But my brother and I did make them, so a little bit of sad nostalgia there, but I don't need them. While the cupboards were fairly easy, now we're moving into the realm of something a little more difficult, and that's the drawers that run down the side of the kitchen island. 2 of these are fairly easy, but 2 of these are a little bit more difficult. Notably, we had to unpack the dishwasher first before we get to one of them, because that is the cup drawer. We are taking an ordered approach to this though, so starting in the top drawer, or the cutlery drawer. We didn't really have anything to get rid of in this one, everything we pretty much like, except for maybe one set of chopsticks that were feeling a little bit gross. Everything else just got a bit of a neaten, a tidy, but realistically we were finding there was a little bit too much stuff in this drawer. We thought it would be good to find a new home for these ones, because that drawer is just really full, and these were the weakest links. Shiny. The next drawer is another one that just needed a little bit of a tidy up, so mainly holding things like snap-lock bags, tinfoil, cling wrap, our bag seals, matches, kitchen twine, so kind of an eclectic bunch. The way they fit into the drawer may not be very pretty, but it does work for us. Next up though was the cup drawer, and the main problem with this one is that not all of our cups fit into the drawer at the same time. Rather than pulling every single thing out, we were just pulling out the ones that we thought we might want to get rid of, and then rearranging the ones that were left over to see the available space. In terms of the ones we decided to get rid of, this mainly came down to size or shape. These are the mugs that are getting replaced, and these are the ones that are getting kept. Do you think we need more mugs?
Yes, we can't have 4 mugs plus 2 otters.
Vogel reckons we need to replace some of the mugs so that we have a couple more, but not all of them because we don't want to end up with the same problem of things not fitting into the drawer. This is my most favoritist mug. It's just like a brilliant size, but they don't sell it anymore. We did end up taking a trip out to Briscoe's to get some more mugs, and of course they were having a sale because it's Briscoe's and they always have a sale, but we did manage to get a pack of 4 new mugs to replace the Jamie Oliver ones in particular. The reason we were replacing these is because the base on the mug is kind of small, meaning that we've had a fair few spills that could have been avoided if the cup was just a little bit of a different shape. The cup drawer is done though, and on to what is going to be the worst part of the kitchen reset, which is the plastics drawer. Doing a reset in this area in particular has been on the cards for over a year now, but the first thing to do is take everything out of the drawer so that we can look at all of the pieces and consider what's going to stay and what's going to go. Vogel and I took to the floor for this one because we were both feeling pretty dang tired at this point, but we went through each of the plastics and sorted them out, making sure that everything had a lid, and started to consider which ones of these we use the most, which ones we don't use as much, and what we might want to do differently. Originally, we were considering replacing these with something that's a little bit more storage friendly, things that stack a little better and hopefully won't get as disorganized in the drawer. This conversation took a very long time and it wasn't necessarily super productive, mainly because by this point we were both just beyond it. We were both very tired and not feeling it. So this is effectively the part of the reset process that defeated us for day one. So this is what we've got at the moment. We're kind of in this like halfway position of being like, oh, we should just get rid of them all and start again, and being conflicted because some of these are good containers. So we're going to park that, have a break, and come back and think about it.
Day 2.
The next day, we thought it would be a good idea to go out and just see what was available in terms of containers, but despite going to a range of different stores, we really couldn't find anything that actually worked. Later that evening, we came back and started doing some research online to see if there was anything we could purchase and just get shipped to us. But by the time we found the ones that we thought were going to be good, the shipping plus the actual items themselves was a ridiculous amount of money. Instead, we decided just to keep the ones that we already had and use the plastic container that we pulled out of our bathroom as part of our bathroom reset to give them a little bit more organization in the drawer. While this is what the drawer looked like before, this is what we ended up with after. But our next project is the storage up here. You may not have noticed this because you might only see me on camera, but I'm kind of short and I can't reach anything up there. Meaning when I go to get a bowl cozy, it's a little bit difficult. Again, with the idea of trying to make the items in the kitchen that we use more frequently more accessible, we want to move some of these around. While Vogel can reach the majority of them, I have great difficulty, so the pieces that I use in particular need to be put at a lower height. You may have noticed earlier that I do actually have a little step stool in the kitchen, just so that I can reach some of the up top storage that we have, because pretty much anything in the upper cupboards I can't reach very easily.
Dust.
There's probably something up here too, but I can't actually see the camera to tell. This was another area that we decided to tag team, with Vogel cleaning off the shelves and me going through and decluttering the items. I was actually pretty pleased with the number of things we managed to take off these shelves and put in other places in the kitchen, in particular the napkins and wooden cutlery for when we have like a lot of people come over and we don't have enough cutlery for everybody. Not only is that space on top of the fridge just a little bit inaccessible, so wanted to move things to places that I could actually get to them, but it kind of always felt that everything stored up there was kind of an afterthought. You know how sometimes we have like a junk drawer? This was like my junk shelf. These are the ones we're getting rid of, mainly rubbish, and this guy, he's not technically rubbish, but he is broken, so they are going. This one's gonna get donated though, because they are coasters and they're still in good nick. Like, we haven't really unboxed them, but they're ceramic and it's like a tactile thing. I can't deal with them. For everything else, we just need to find it a home, whether that be back up on top of the fridge or somewhere else. As mentioned, it was just really nice that not that much stuff went back up on top of the fridge. A lot of the items found new homes in the kitchen, and the bowl cozies got placed somewhere I can actually reach them. After this though, it was time for a final wipe down of the kitchen, and then getting to enjoy the outcomes of our work. Although at face value it doesn't look all that different, it does feel so much better. It's good to know that just everything in the kitchen is stuff we actually use, stuff that isn't expired if it's food, and is organized in a way that is a little bit more peace-inducing. If you enjoy decluttering content though, we have plenty of other videos on the channel, but they are all in this playlist here, so click or tap on that one and I'll see you over there.
Little baby cup, so cute.
Check for expiration dates. Expiration, come on. Let's try that again.